Yo, yo, yo. I'm Debbie. I'm an addict. Where am I supposed to be? Am I good? I got to check with the taper guy back here. Make sure I do this right. I'm Debbie. I'm an addict. Hi. Well, here we are. Well, I got asked to do this like 3 years. I finally made it. And Harv got somebody else to ask me this year because he said I liked him better than him, and I might say yes, so I don't know. I probably would have anyway. I'm nervous. I can just say that. I'm really nervous. You know, I've been to a lot of places and shared where I didn't really know anybody. And I can tell you that's a whole lot easier than sharing in front of a room full of people that have been watching me for years. So I'm just going to breathe. You know, my using was a whole lot like yours, I'm sure, or none of us would be here. I started using when I was 13. I grew up around using and dysfunction and fighting and craziness and, you know, all kinds of stuff. And, you know, I always like to tell this story. The first mood-altering drug I ever did was gasoline. And because some girls I was hanging out with that were a couple years older than me told me it would get you high. And I didn't know what high was, but I was ready to do it. So I huffed some gas and I liked it. And, you know, and really the writing was on the wall. Because as soon as I figured out I'd like that feeling of not, you know, really dealing with reality, I brought this 5-gallon gas can into the house and set it at the foot of my bed. And nobody ever asked me why. You know, I don't know about you, but if one of my kids brought the gas can in and had it sitting in their room, I'd be wondering what the hell was going on. And I was also smoking, so that was always, you know, at the time I didn't think anything about it. Now I look back on it and go, man, that was really weird. You know, that was weird. And then I started huffing paint because I could carry that around and take it to school. And then somebody turned me on to weed, and well, I never went back to huffing chemicals, I can tell you that. But you know, I was in a lot of pain. That's what I remember. I remember always feeling weird and different and being in a lot of pain. I remember very clearly, like my 7th or 8th birthday when I was blowing out the candles and making the wish, that I was just wishing for some peace, to just feel okay, because I never felt okay. You know, before I used to always have my nose stuck in a book because I could go somewhere else, you know, and not be in my own skin, not be in my own family, not be in my own house. That was my escape. And so, you know, I know that I was always looking for an escape. I always had these fantasies and just these things that I would play out for hours on end about how I wanted my life to look so that I'd be okay. And it was always about outside things. I was a really good student in school. I was really smart. I could just make straight A's without even really trying. And when I started using, I started pissing that away. You know, when I was 15, my brother, I had a brother that was a year older than me, and my brother was my first drug dealer. My brother was always dealing a lot of drugs before he could even drive, and there were always a lot of drugs in our house. And you know, I'd do acid all the time and smoke weed, and I hated drinking, and I always swore I was not going to be a drunk because my dad was a drunk, and I wasn't going to act like that. And so, you know, I just did a lot of drugs. And, you know, I quit school when I was like 15, and just, you know, I ran the streets. I ran away. I ran the streets. I got with guys to try to feel better. I did drugs to try to feel better, you know, and in the process of all that, I started having kids when I was 19. And, you know, my daughter, God love her, you know, I grew up trying to raise her, and I didn't do a very good job for a really long time. Very self-centered, wanted what I wanted, and, you know, along the way I had kids and husbands and boyfriends, and I didn't do any of it any justice. You know, I can tell you that. I never knew how to live. I didn't know how to deal with stuff. I didn't want to deal with stuff. I've always been really rebellious and defiant. I don't know how much of that has changed. It's better. You know, I can make myself tone it down when I have to. But I still got a very rebellious streak in me. You know, I don't like to be told what to do. And so I started getting busted and, you know, just having this crazy life. And I had times where things were pretty okay. I remember at one point, you know, I'd gone through this whole thing of shooting dope when I was like 20, 21 years old. And I remember this guy that I was getting my dope from at the time, and I was coming down one time and crying and depressed, you know, all that shit. That's what I always did. I'd stay up for 10 days, and then I'd start coming down, and I'd cry for 2 and sleep for 3 and get up and do it again. But anyway, I was having one of those episodes, and I remember this guy looking at me and telling me, look, man, this is the way it is. It's like a merry-go-round. You either get off or you get on, but there ain't no in between. And, you know, I realized today he was talking to me about the disease of addiction, you know, because I tried doing it half-ass and sitting on the fence and chipping away and this and that. But when I was like 29, I'd had 2 kids by then. I was 29, and my mom and my husband at the time got a hold of somebody, and they did this intervention on me and wanted to send me to treatment because I was dying. You know, I was dying. And I was really fucked up and strung out and locked in a room all the time and couldn't take care of my kids, couldn't take care of myself. I couldn't take care of nothing. And so they did this intervention, and they wanted me to go to this treatment center. And I remember this guy sitting in my mom's living room and showing me these pictures of this really nice place. And I didn't even know what treatment was about. You know, I just thought, I mean, I don't know what I thought. I think I thought I'd just go in there and get to sleep and eat really good for a while and maybe have some counseling sessions, and that would be that. I didn't know anything about Narcotics Anonymous. I didn't know anything about how to do any of that for the long haul, but, you know, I was tired, and so, you know, I went. And treatment was weird. It was really weird. You know, it was the first time I'd been without having any drugs in my body for that long in like 16 years. And it was pretty crazy for me. But, you know, when the drugs got out of my system, all of this pain and emotion and guilt and shame just came rushing forth. And I didn't really know what to do with it. And I had a really bad situation at home that I was going back into. And I'd been there about 3 weeks, and these AA people used to come in, and they used to do meetings in there. And, you know, I remember in their format, in the very beginning of the meeting, they would, there was this little blurb in there about, you'll limit your conversations to problems with alcohol only. And I was just like, fuck, I don't drink, you know, so I didn't talk. You know, I didn't say anything. And the last week I was there, a couple people from Lebanon came in and brought in an H&I meeting for Narcotics Anonymous, and then I paid attention. You know, that got my attention. It was the language and the literature and the empathy, and I related, you know. And back then they gave us basic texts in treatment, and I had one. I had all the little books, and they were real nice and neat on my table, and Actually, there's a woman right here. She was my roommate in treatment in 1989. So what a trip years later when we came back together in Narcotics Anonymous. That was pretty crazy. But anyway, I had these books, and after that H&I meeting, I was pretty blown away. And I went back to my room, and I stayed up all night, and I read the basic text. I read the whole thing that night. And, I felt a spark of hope. I really didn't believe I could do it, but I felt a spark of hope. I mean, I read that book, and I felt like somebody actually understood how I felt and who I was. And, I think that was the first time in my life that I ever felt like anybody understood me. These faceless people behind this book that I didn't know that had written it. I was like, oh my God, they get it. And so I got out, and there was this guy in treatment in one of the classes I went to, and I remember him saying this thing that, if you decide to go back out there and use again, it won't ever be the same, because we've ruined that for you. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh yeah, you want to bet? And so like 4 days after I got out of treatment, I decided to go shoot dope, and it was pretty horrible. But it really, it didn't stop me. I mean, I just could not fathom a life of not getting high, and I wasn't ready to surrender, and I just would not put the things in place in my life that I needed to do to stay clean. So, what I did was I came in and out of Narcotics Anonymous for a long time, for like 5.5 years. I got another felony, and I had another baby, and a lot of shit happened in between. I got with this guy, because as Wendy says, there's always a guy. And there were plenty. But I got with this guy, and man, that was like fire and gasoline. And we fought a lot. And I used to always feel like this victim, and I believed I was a victim. And I remember the first time I did a 4-step, years later, of understanding that, I was not a victim there, that nobody, nobody was holding me hostage, and that at least half the times when I got my ass beat, I threw the first punch, because I was really violent. I was angry, and I was violent. And I fought, and I didn't take any shit, and I got my ass kicked, and I kicked a lot of asses, I mean, that's just who I was. And, I remember, after I got the next felony, I wound up in jail for like a week, and Tony Perella, remember Tony P, came to my hearing the day of my final disposition, and I thought, okay, this is it, they're going to give me probation and yada, yada, yada. And the judge looked at me and he said, I'm remanding you to the Greene County Jail until I make my decision. And, I was always indignant and offended anytime anybody put the smack down on me, you know what I mean? Like, how dare you? And when he did that, I remember looking at him like, you can't fucking do that. You got to tell me what you're doing today, but he did. He sent my ass off to jail, and I didn't know how long I was going to be there, if I was going to get out, when I was going to get out, if I was going to get probation, if I was going to go to prison. I mean, I just didn't know. And he let me sit there for about a week, and then he let me out and gave me my probation. And, when I walked out of Greene County Jail that day, I remember I vowed to myself as that cop was escorting me down the hall to the door. I remember telling myself, I will never spend another day in jail again. Jail was not for me. Just couldn't deal with it. I remember, and there was this woman in Narcotics Anonymous, Cheryl B., and, I'd been bouncing in and out, so I knew a lot of people here. And, I remember calling her up, and she took my little call from jail, and I was just going on and on about all this shit and the unfairness of the situation and blah, blah, blah. And she, she listened for a few minutes, and then she said, you know what? I want you to hang up the phone and go get a pen and a paper and write about your powerlessness and the unmanageability in your life. And I said, you don't fucking understand. I'm in jail. And she said, yep, I understand you're in jail, and I bet they have a pen and paper. Click. I was just like, what a bitch. Why do I want to call those people? So, I wasn't anywhere near surrendering at that point. I wasn't. But I walked out of Greene County Jail and I immediately went and got loaded. And, and then I just started playing my PO, and I was with this guy, and they had, well, we were both on paper, and, they had ordered both of us to stay away from each other. And, of course, we didn't. We were living together. And, I was scamming the PO, and we owned a bar that neither one of us could even hold a liquor license on. We got somebody else to do that. And, it was just this total insanity. Probably like a year before that, I had, my son had, his dad had flat taken him away from me. He was just like, nah, you ain't getting him. And, I had a hard time even getting to go see him. My daughter, I had taken to my mom's about a year prior to that and told my mom, I just need you to keep her for a couple of weeks till I can get it together. And, I think it was like 3 years later she came home because I couldn't get it together. Things just kept getting worse and worse and worse. I started drinking. All the shit I said I'd never do. I just did it all. I sold it all out. It didn't matter. And, when I was pregnant with my youngest daughter, Cheyenne, I couldn't stop using. I knew I couldn't shoot dope, but we had this bar, and I was drinking, and I would go, all this shit that you hear about, like I would go get pints of Jack Daniels, and I'd hide them in the oatmeal box in the pantry, and I couldn't stop. And, I just kept getting bigger and farther along, and I just couldn't quit drinking. And I'd get up every morning, and I'd tell myself, I am not going to do this today. I'm not going to do this. And, by 2 o'clock, I'd be doing it. And, that was the insanity of my using and the using against my will. And I hated myself for it. And I, was just sure that she was going to be born with all kinds of stuff wrong with her. And I still couldn't stop. And, when I had her, she was fine. And I had a really big problem. I just did. I was a mess, and I was living in a violent relationship, and, everything was a lie in my life. So, anyway, it all fell apart like it always does. The PO, everything came down. We had a big violent clash one night, and the cops came, and, I just got busted out on all of it. And I remember having to call my PO the next day because I had contact with the law the night before, and, she said, you need to come in. And, the insanity and all that is she gave me 4 days. Like, I had time to clean up because I knew she'd drop on me. And I couldn't stop. And I just kept on using. And I walked in there 4 days later, and I was dirty, and I knew I was dirty, and she knew I was dirty, and, everything hit the fan at that point. And, she confronted me with a bunch of shit about my associations and the things I'd been doing and the people I'd been hanging out with, and I sat there in the chair, and of course I denied it all. And I said, no. And she whipped this file out and threw it down on the desk and had this whole dossier on me from the biker task force. And she called me deceitful, and I remember being very offended by that. And I remember walking out of her office thinking, that bitch just called me deceitful. How fucking dare her? Because I didn't get it. You know, I just didn't get it. I didn't get it that I was a liar and I was a cheat and I was deceitful, you know, and that that I needed to change. It was everybody else's fault. And you know, that's what the line in Why Are We Here? Through our inability to accept personal responsibility, we were actually creating our own problems. And you know, that's one of the most beautiful, painful things I've ever learned here, ever. And it gave me such freedom to understand that I'm not a victim. I'm in charge of my decisions. I'm in charge of, you know, how I handle things in my life and how that's going to turn out based on what I do. This guy said one time, you're right where you're supposed to be based on every decision you've made up to this point. You know, and I sat with that for a really long time, you know, and really let that sink in about the, you know, my responsibility in my life. So anyway, she was like, you're going to go to treatment and you're going to get clean or you're going to go to prison. You know, and I'd made that vow. I'm not going back to jail. So, you know, the crazy part, there was always a guy and then there was always another guy. So the one guy, of course, he was busted out too with his PO when all the shit went down. So he decided to check out and check in. So I dropped him off at the Marion Center and went to this other guy's house that was in NA and started up with him. And like, wow. 2 days later, I moved out of my house, moved in with him, slept with him, and picked up a white key tag. And that's just the way I did shit. You know, I don't recommend it, but it's what I did. It took me a long time to be able to stand in front of a room full of people and admit that. But you know what? I've made peace with everything I ever did. I've learned a lot of shit. And I've made peace with all that stuff. I'm good. I don't care. I know I was fucking crazy. Still am. Thank you. But not that kind of crazy. So, you know, I started going to Narcotics Anonymous, and they put me in the C-Star program. It was like a full-time job with overtime and shit. Like, I had to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning and stay there till 4:30 in the. I was just like, are you kidding me? I can't even get out of bed. I am not employable. I can't do this. You know, it was like Monday through Friday and a half a day on Saturday. And holy shit, that was hard. You know, I couldn't stay awake. I was still detoxing. It was just crazy. But how I got through that, I have no idea. But I started going to meetings all the time. And, you know, I had this counselor, and I remember we were sitting in this group one time. I don't even know what happened, but, you know, he got about this far from my nose, and he said, you're never going to stay clean. And I was just like, you know, that whole thing, want to bet? You want to bet? I'll show you. I'll fucking stay clean. He knew how to work me. He did. He knew I was defiant and rebellious, and he knew how to work me. And then there came this point in time where, you know, he used to always give me shit about, because I was always dressed in black boots, black jeans, black Harley shirt, and a black leather jacket. You know, that's what I wore every single day. And he called it my biker uniform. And he said that I had an attitude to go with it. And so anyway, I was trying to progress to this next level in treatment. And he wanted me to work on doing something different. Change my behavior, change the things I did, change the way I acted, my attitude, and all this stuff. And so he got on this kick of I needed to learn how to dress differently, to wear a dress. I was just like, I don't wear no dress, you know. And so anyway, it just came down to this point of where he was like, I'm not gonna progress you to the next level until you're willing to try this. And so I was just like, oh. So I went home that night, and I thought, okay, I'll play your silly little fucking game. And so I showed up the next day in the shortest, tightest black dress I could find with 4-inch heels and my leather jacket. I wore my dress, moved me up. So, you know. Yeah, I was silly. I was just ridiculous is what I was. I thought I was cool and a badass, and I was really just silly. But I was learning. You know, I had a lot of bumps along the way. So, the thing about it is I got through that treatment and I kept coming to NA, but the deal was I never stayed clean for a long stretch. I'd get like 30 days, get high, come back. 60 days, get high, come back. 3 months, get high, come back. But my times of using were getting a lot shorter. And my times of being in here were getting more frequent. And, what happened was this program just started getting into my heart and my head. And I'd get high and I could hear all this stuff. And I could hear the readings. And it's just like, oh. So I went along like that for a while. And finally, after about a year and a half, I got out of the relationship. And I'd been getting high that last time and not telling anybody. And I'd been doing that for about 7 months. I'd go to meetings, I'd go home at night, and I'd get high. And I'd go to meetings, and I'd go home at night, and I'd get high. And that was the worst. It really was. It was the worst. And I was getting real close to surrender, but I didn't know it. And then there was this last night, and I went to a meeting, and I didn't want to do it anymore. And I still hadn't gotten honest with anybody about what I'd been doing. But I went to a meeting, I knew I didn't want to do it anymore, and I knew I was getting ready to do it again. And Mindy was in that meeting. And I remember getting honest in there and sharing about, I want to go get loaded. And, she came up to me after the meeting, and she tried to get me to come home with her, or she'd come hang out with me or whatever. I was like, no, I'll be all right. And I immediately left there, and I went and got loaded. And, I got up the next morning, and I was just like, fuck. I didn't want to do it anymore, and I didn't know how to not do it. And I always thought that I needed to be good. To stay clean and be in here, I need to somehow learn how to be good. And I knew I couldn't be good because I was defiant and I was rebellious and I didn't want to be good. Sometimes I just wanted to go be bad. I remember one time I had a 60-day key tag in my pocket. And the guy that went to the Marion Center, of course, I was still going back and seeing him. He was the father of my youngest. And I remember walking in a bar one night, and I knew he'd been screwing around with this girl, and I had my 13-year-old daughter with me, and I had the baby with me, and I walked in this bar, and I set the little carrier up on the bar, and there was that girl, and I looked over there, and I just, kind of under my breath said, I'm going to kick her ass. And my oldest daughter looked at me, she said, Mom, please don't. And I just looked there and went, sorry. And I proceeded to drag this girl out of that bar and start wailing on her. And, something happened like right in the middle of it. It was almost like that 60-day key tag in my pocket. It just got really hot. Like I could feel it. Like I was like, holy shit, what am I doing? And I just kind of threw up my hands and went, I don't want to do this. And she's looked at me like, you are fucking crazy. And I was, I really was. I was just nuts. So, a whole lot of my story in the beginning was about learning how to keep my hands off people, and I haven't hit anybody in a really long time. And I hope I don't. I hope I don't. I think about it a lot. But, there's a lot of things, a lot of it for me is I always know there's a 9th step looming in my future, and I think about, okay, if I want to hit this person, then someday I got to come back and make amends for that. Yeah, no. No. So, when I picked up that last white key tag, I had zero hope that I was going to do anything any different than what I'd been doing. But I wanted to. And really, I just, it did not feel like surrender to me at that time, but it was. And I came to an absolute surrender that I knew, Danny used to always tell me, if you don't get the drugs in your hand, they can't get in your body. And that was just, I didn't get that for a long time. And then, I started getting that. It's like, stay away from the drugs. Stay away from the people. Stay right here in Narcotics Anonymous. Go to meetings every day. If you feel like using, call somebody, you know, because I never would call anybody. I'd always just, nah, I'm all right. I'll be all right. That was what I always said. I'll be all right. But, you know, I humbled myself, and I started calling people, and I started staying clean. And, you know, my life got better almost immediately. You know, I got a GED. I went to college. You told me to stay out of relationships for a year. I kind of did it. I mean, I didn't get into a full-blown relationship. I kind of dated. I guess that's what you'd call it. But, you know, I didn't get all attached and hooked up. I started working on myself and working steps and trying to figure out how to live. And when I had a year clean, I'd been friends with this guy for about a year and a half, and we started dating, and he followed the rule. The day I got a year clean, he took me out to dinner. The day I got a year clean. So he followed the rule. You know, and you know, we were good. Life was good. And, you know, my kids were back in my life. I was actually able to see my son and keep him in my house for, you know, without supervision. Things were going really, really good. When I had 2.5 years clean, I went to the World Convention, and we came home late, and Candace and Jacob were somewhere else, went and picked up Cheyenne, went home, went to bed. Next morning, I woke up, the smoke alarm was going off, and my daughter had started a fire. And we couldn't get her out. And we finally got her out, and man, I just remember sitting in my front yard, you know, because I'd come straight up out of bed, and I had on a too big NA shirt in my underwear and my NA shirt, sitting in my front yard holding her, waiting on an ambulance, and she was fucked up. And we went to the hospital, and they took her back, and they put me off over in this little room, and you know, we didn't have cell phones back then, because, you know, I come from the dinosaur days. And we didn't have any cell phones, and but I had my sponsor's telephone number memorized. And I recommend that, whether you have a damn cell phone or not, that you have that number memorized. And, you know, because I couldn't think. All I could think was, you know, my mind was just screaming, this is not happening. This is not supposed to happen. And I called her up, and she called people, and the next thing I know, it was like, there were like 50 people at that hospital from Narcotics Anonymous, and we spent a really long day there. She was burned over 94% of her body, and you know, the doctor started talking to me late in the afternoon about turning these machines off and about what was going on with her body, and I was just like, no, man, I got a God that's really big, and this is all going to be okay. You know, that's what I believed. It's all going to be okay. I've seen lots of miracles, and God's going to give one to Cheyenne, you know, and it didn't work out that way. I went back there about 7 o'clock that night, and there was this bubble of blood right here in her nose, and the way the doctor had explained it to me was that she was bleeding internally, and they couldn't stop it, and that she was basically drowning in her own blood. And I knew the right thing to do was to let her go. So I did. And you know, I don't know. I don't know. Well, I do know how I made it through the next couple of years. I mean, it was just other people. You know, I couldn't pick up the phone, didn't want to pick up the phone, I didn't want to live. I didn't want to get high, I just wanted to blow my fucking brains out, quite frankly. I just did. It hurt. It hurt to breathe. You know, I remember sitting on the side of the bed at my mom's. You know, I couldn't go home. My daughter was gone. I was just lost. I wasn't wearing my own clothes. I mean, everything just flipped upside down, just like that. And I remember sitting on the side of that bed and crying until I thought I was going to break. I have never cried so hard in my life. And I felt guilty, and I felt ripped off, and I was mad at God, and I was mad at me, and just... But people just kept showing up, and they started getting on my fucking nerves, quite frankly. I mean, they just wouldn't leave me alone. You know, they'd call and call and call. And my mom had a wall phone, and I'll never forget, we finally had to just take a chair and set it right there by the wall phone, you know. But, you know, they weren't leaving me alone. That's for damn sure. There was this girl. She was like my little outlet. This chick called me up a couple days after we buried my daughter. And I remember it was on a Sunday because it was hardcore night. Hardcore Recovery was my home group. And this chick called me up, and she was drunk. And she told me she got drunk because my daughter died. And she told me that if anybody ever had a right to go get high, it was me. And man, I let her fucking have it. I was just like, how dare you? You know, I'm hanging on to this one line in the basic text for everything it's worth that I don't ever have to pick up again, no matter what. And you are not going to take that away from me. You are not going to take that away from me. You know, and so, you know, I just kind of existed for a long time. And I remember finally after about 6 or 7 months, I knew this woman that was a therapist, and she was kind of like a grandmotherly type, and she was really sweet, and I really liked her. She'd done some work with my son. And, you know, I didn't want to pray. I didn't want to be alive. Probably the only reason I stayed alive at that point was because of my other 2 kids. Because I used to sit and fantasize and think of ways I could die and make it look like an accident. And I couldn't really figure out how to get that done. And finally I called this woman and I said, I think about killing myself all day long, every day, and I need you to help me not do that. And so I started going to her, and about that time my sponsor showed up at my house that one day. My sponsor back then, she was so freaking cool, and she was kind of like a pit bull, but she came off really sweet. But if you pushed her, she was like a pit bull. And I had finished a 10th step before Cheyenne died, and she showed up one day with a little book and her notebook, because that's how we did it. We'd sit down at the table and we'd go through, you know, the steps in the basic text, and we'd go through line by line and talk about them and write, and that's how we worked the steps. And so she showed up, and I said, what are you doing? She said, well, we're going to work your 11th step. And I said, no, we're not. She's like, yeah, we are. I said, look at me. Look at my life. You think I give a fuck about the 11th step? And, you know, she just like got right up in my face, and she said, that 11th step is the only thing that's going to save your life. So go get your book and go get your notebook and sit down at the table, and we're going to work your step. And, you know, I did, because I trusted her and I loved her, and I knew she cared about me, and I knew she wanted to help me. but my heart wasn't in it. And, that path back, it was just, it was just long and hard. I could just tell you about episode after episode after episode, but really, it was long and it was hard. It took me 4 years before I could say my daughter's name without feeling like somebody was stabbing me in the heart. I mean, it just was horrible, and but I kept going to meetings, and I kept doing service work, and I didn't put drugs in my body, and I wasn't always graceful, and I was really angry, and I cussed a lot, and I kicked a lot, and, I let people help me when I could, and that was really just the best I could do. And, so I'll just tell you, I'm sure you've already heard it, whether you've ever heard me or not, that relapse is for pussies. So, I don't want to hear it, really. Honestly, if you go relapse and you got some lame-ass blame excuse of why you did that, I wouldn't suggest you come and tell me about it. Because I will let you know in no uncertain terms what I think about it, Because really, all we care about is what you want to do about your problem and how we can help. That's it. I don't care about all that other stuff. It won't get you clean. It doesn't serve you. What serves you is what you want to do about your problem and how we can help. And if you want what we have, do what we do. And if you don't, keep doing it your way. I mean, I did it my way for a long time, and, wasn't really all that much fun, or I wouldn't be here. But what I have today is a life beyond my wildest dreams. I really, really do. I have peace like I've never had in my life. Now, was the road out of there, has it been all straight and calm and smooth? Oh, hell no. No. I mean, there's still so many things that just keep getting peeled back for me to work on and work on and work on. And I just finished another 7-step, and, there's just always a lot more stuff to do. It's great, I've not been the queen of good relationships, I can tell you that. I haven't. And I went through a really ugly divorce in Narcotics Anonymous. Yeah, that one was fun. And actually, Angela and I were talking about some of that outside, because I've known Angela. There are people in here that have known me since before the clean date I have now. And I love them for it. I'm glad. They saw me in all my insane glory. So, if you think I'm crazy now, you should have seen me 17 years ago. 18, 19, fuck. Nuts. But, my husband and I went through a lot to go through that grief process and losing my daughter, and it took a toll. And, him, me, my kids, it took something away from all of us that we never got back. And, and I don't blame anybody around the way they reacted to that. That was just, it was awful. It hurt to breathe. It just did for a long, long time. And, our marriage fell apart, and it took us 10 years to make peace with each other. We just made peace with each other about a couple years ago when my brother was dying. My brother and him were best friends, and he and I basically sat with my brother the last 5 days of his life, and was there with him when he drew his last breath, and we made peace through that. And I know my brother was probably smiling because he was thinking, oh, thank God, I've been listening to that shit from both of them for 10 years. But I'm grateful for that, and without being a member here, I wouldn't have gotten there. I wouldn't have gotten there. And so yeah, there was that, and I did 4 years of no relationships. I didn't even date, or even what I used to call dating, any of that. I did none of that for 4 years, and I learned a lot of things about myself. And when I decided to get in a relationship again, I got in one of the sickest relationships I've ever been in my life. Yep. And you know, I was nuts. I was just nuts. I watched my disease. Yeah, I heard Mindy say this one time. I was like, oh my God, that completely describes what I did that time. It was like I made this conscious decision to go insane. I had my eyes wide open. I saw what was going on, and I just kept going. Fast, like really fast, all in. And I watched my disease manifest itself fully in my life with no drugs. And I was crazy, you know, and I felt like I was high a few times just because of the obsession and the insanity and the not being able to stop and, you know, just all the stuff, but no drugs. And so I had found this place that I really loved out in the mountains in Asheville, North Carolina. And I always wanted to move there. And then the opportunity came to move there. You know, and I remember thinking, that's the ticket. I'll leave. I'll leave and everything will be fine. And, you know, I can assure you that the day I left Springfield, Missouri, I was driving as fast as I could for Asheville, North Carolina, and just thinking, holy shit, I am so glad to be away from all you people. You people. And I got on the other end, and it really sucked. Because there I was. And I wasn't any better, because I just took me with me. And, you know, once again, at 13 years clean, I had to learn all over again. I'm the problem. I am responsible. Sorry. For what goes on. And, yeah, it was an ugly, beautiful year. That's what it was. That year in Asheville, North Carolina, that was a very ugly, beautiful year. This woman had been sponsoring me for like 7 years, and we'd been doing long distance for a long time because she moved away. And I wanted to keep her as my sponsor, and she knew everything about me. Because, you know, that was one thing that I figured out when I got clean was that, you know, sponsorship was a big core, you know, and that if I had a sponsor, I needed to be willing to let them know every single thing about me, all the crazy thoughts that I swore I was never going to tell anybody, all the crap that needed to go in the 4-step that I was going to take to my grave, all that stuff. And so I did, and I truly allowed this woman to know me and to sponsor me, you know, because I believe that, you know, your sponsor is only about as effective as you are as a sponsee, really. I mean, what are you going to do if you got somebody that's just not, you know. Anyway, so she put me on this round of steps, and it was, this round of steps was focused on money and relationships. You know, and I remember sitting there thinking, well, what's that going to do? You know, and it did a lot, I can tell you that. It did a lot, and it was really hard. When I was on the 4-step, I would get up in the mornings, and I would go in this room that I went into to write on this 4-step, and I'd look at that notebook, and I'd just start crying. Like, oh, no, I don't want to do it. But I made myself do it, you know. I was willing. I just was sick of being sick. You know, I was sick of being sick. I was sick of thinking the way I did and acting the way I did and all the shit I did. And so, you know, I did it. And a lot of things changed for me. And then there was this guy, Wendy. There was a guy. And I'd known this guy for a really long time, like 10 years. We'd been friends in Narcotics Anonymous. He was back here in Missouri. I was in North Carolina. I came back. My mom got really sick. And my mom was terminally ill, and I came back. My mom wanted to go home and die. And I told her that I would come and help her make that happen. And I came home, and I took care of my mom, and she died. And in the meantime, I started seeing this guy, and, you know, I mean, I dated this guy for like 3 weeks and decided on the way back to North Carolina that we were going to, you know, we decided we were going to move in together. So I packed up all my shit and came back across the country and moved to a place that I never wanted to live. And, you know, that was just jacked up. It was just messed up. But I learned a lot of stuff because it's always like that. You know, if you just stay clean, you learn a lot of stuff. And I did learn a lot of stuff. I learned a lot about, you know, I didn't do a lot of service. And, well, I didn't do any service. There you go. That's the true part of it. I didn't do any service except sponsor people. And, you know, but I started learning about hobbies, and I found out some stuff I like to do, and I learned how to make quilts, and I learned how to fish. Stick a hook through a minnow's eyeball, man. I love it. It's good. It's good. And it's quiet out on the lake. It's good. So, you know, I mean, I just did a whole lot of stuff that just I had never, you know, like, you know, it's like turning 50. I turned 50 a couple years ago, and, you know, I just remember waking up on my birthday going, how can this be? There's no way I can be 50. Like, in my mind, I'm this 25-year-old rock star, you know, and I'm really big, and I'm not afraid of anything, you know. I mean, that's what goes on in my mind. And, man, when I woke up on my 50th, no birthday has ever bothered me till that one. And fucking AARP, what is up with that? They sent me this shit on my birthday. Found me. I was like, how did they find me? What? How do they know where I'm at? You know, they send me this shit, and they still keep sending it to me. I keep throwing it away. I ain't ready for that. And people keep telling me you're going to get great discounts. I don't care. And I just keep throwing it away. But, you know, really, just that whole part of getting older, and, you know, I've been here a long time, and I've grown up a lot here, but it freaked me out, you know. It's still kind of freaking me out. It's not as bad. I mean, I'm getting ready to be 52 now. I need to get over it, right? So, you know, but I spent 3.5 years up there in the flatlands, what I call it. The barren part of my life is what I like to call it. I didn't like the meetings. I didn't like the people. I didn't like the subdivision I lived in. I'm not a subdivision chick. And I didn't like much anything up there. You know, I just didn't. And we were both pretty miserable with each other. It's you know, it's one thing to be really good friends with somebody for 10 years. When they're off with somebody else and you're off doing your thing, and then you date for 3 weeks and move in together, yeah, no. That's just not, it didn't work out. And, you know, I was miserable. But really, that 3.5 years, it gave me so much about learning how to have hobbies and how to slow down and how to really live my life, you know. And what it also gave me was the deepest sense of gratitude for Springfield, Missouri, and this fellowship, and all the people here that have loved me, that have known me, that I just, you know, I wanted to come home so bad for so long, you know. I mean, I got a granddaughter, and, you know, when we split up, I was pretty freaked out. I'd bought a house, and the whole plan was to, like, finish this basement and sell this house and make some money. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff, and I was freaked out, you know. And I really wish someday I could get to the point that when I have a big crisis in my life that I could just be all graceful and not cuss and yell and kick and freak out, but I'm not there yet. And that's what I did. I cussed and I yelled and I freaked out and I called people, and Kathy was my sponsor, and I'd call her up just screaming into that phone. You know, I don't know how I'm going to do this shit. And, you know, remember at some point after a few weeks of that, I can only do that for so long, and then I'm just sick of myself. And I remember sitting there one day just, you know, it just got really quiet inside, and I just thought, you know what? You are not a pussy. So get up off your ass, learn how to do some things, find the people who can do the things that you can't, and take care of your business. And at that point, I really got into this forward motion, and I was really excited about coming home, but I knew I had to do all this shit before I could come home. So, you know, my house was still here. I mean, all that was just a God thing. I think God knew that I was coming back home, you know. And as soon as I came back to Springfield, you know, remember the first meeting I went to when I got back to town, and I you know, because I worried, like, is Narcotics Anonymous ever going to be the same for me again? Because I'd lost all that fire and that the way I'd felt about NA when I left here. I'd lost it all, and I didn't know if I was going to have it back. As soon as I sat down to meeting in Springfield, it was like, there it is, you know. And I've been grateful. I've been so grateful since I've been home. And I get to be a grandma. My granddaughter is like 5 minutes away from me. And, you know, when she wraps her little arms around my neck and says, I love you, Mamo, everything's okay. You know, it doesn't really matter what the hell's going on. My kids are crazy. I would have to say that. But, you know, hey, I raised them mostly, so... You know, I love my son. I've been on a really big journey with my son for a long time. He's one of us, and he knows it. He knows it, and he went to prison for 5 years, and he got out, and pretty soon after he got out, he started using again, and I mean, I watched his disease progress, you know, and last summer I told him the first time I'd ever said it to him in his whole life, it's like, you know, my son is lost to the disease of addiction. And until he manages to make his way back, I got nothing to say. Don't come to my house. Don't call me on the phone. Don't text me. Don't talk to me. You know, because that little fucker running the show right now, that's not my son. And, you know, it broke my heart to do that, but I had to, out of self-preservation. I was not going to stand by and watch him destroy himself anymore. I'd been doing it for so many years, and I just can't do it anymore, you know. And he got busted again, and he's been in jail for like 4 months now, and he's got some pretty heavy stuff on him, and, you know, I don't really know what's going to happen. But I know that he's praying now, and he's asking for things from the court, like drug court, and I was just looking at him like, really? You asked for that? Good for you, you know, and good for you for praying, because I know that he wouldn't pray for a long time. And I saw him today. You know, we had a really good visit. We don't always have good visits. One day we were screaming at each other in there. I figured they'd throw me out, but, you know, they probably hear moms come in there and yell at their sons. So, but I love my kids with all my heart. But really, it's my deepest desire that before I die, I'll get to see him be happy, joyous, and free. That's what I really want. So, I feel like there were like a million things I needed to say. I got a couple of really incredible sponsees, I know that. You know, I got one that's just walking through so much stuff right now, and, you know, I love it when she, you know, she just made this comment at one point, I'm not a victim, you know, and I dig that, you know. I really admire most of the people I know here. I love Narcotics Anonymous here. If you think it sucks, go somewhere else. I'll tell you one place in particular you could go where it really sucks. But it'll make you grateful. It did me. I got into service. Thanks, Wendy. Wendy's been up my ass ever since I got back. I just have to say that. Up my ass. I used to sponsor Wendy years ago. And so I guess she's getting back at me for all the shit I used to say to her. But she's been up my butt. And, you know, she really, she lit a fire under my ass. And so I did become the area secretary recently. And, yeah, your minutes are going to be late. Not my fault. Waiting on the printer, I swear to God. Waiting on the printer. You'll get them. Don't worry about it. Next week. Should have took better notes. That's all I can tell you. So, yeah. Yep. I love this program, you know, and if you're new here, Your life's already changing. You may not know it yet, but it will. This shit gets in you. It'll get in your cells. You can't get away from it. You get high. The readings will be ringing in your ears. You might as well just give it up and stay here because you're fucked. I'm telling you. But it's good to be home. You know, it's just good to be home. And I'm honored. I really thank you guys for asking me to share. So now, Harv, I've done my time at the New Year's Eve function. So let's just leave me alone with all that. And I like to close with this line. I feel like that's not in the right place. Kind of late to be worrying about it now, but anyway. This is probably the favorite part of the basic text for me. When we are willing to follow this course of action and take advantage of the help available to us, a whole new life is possible. In this way, we do recover. Today, secure in the love of the fellowship, we can finally look another human being in the eye and be grateful for who we are. Thank you.